افسوس نبی زادیوں کا شام میں جانا سجاد سے پوچھو سر ننگے وہ ماں بہنوں کا دربار میں جانا سجاد سے پوچھو افسوس چھپتی تھی نبی نبی زادی کے پیچھے کس شرم و حیا سے اور شمر کا ان بیویوں کے نام بتانا سجاد سے پوچھو بیٹھے ہوئے دربار میں سب چھوٹے بڑے تھے سادات کھڑے تھے سر تشت میں رکھا ہوا زینب کو دکھانا سجاد سے پوچھو بابا کے منہ پر رکھا اور مر گئی ہمشیر سجاد کی تقدیر وہ بابا کے منہ پر سے سکینہ کا ہٹانا سجاد سے پوچھو جب دختر شبیر سے زندہ میں بیعت بندھے ہاتھوں سے اٹھانا، سجاد سے پوچھو۔ جب غسل سکینہ کو وہاں دے چکی غسل تھا سب کا برا حال، اس ننھی سی میت پہ نشان رسی پہ پانا، سجاد سے پوچھو۔ اکبر کے کلیجے میں لگی ظلم کی برچی، حالت ہی عجب تھی، تھا کتنا کٹھن حال صغرا کو سنانا، سجاد سے پوچھو۔ افسوس نبی زادیوں کا شام میں جانا، سجاد سے پوچھو۔
With the loud salawat, if you could all please scoot up as much as you can. With Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Without any further delay, I would like to invite Sheikh Mohammad al-Hilli to take the pulpit. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وخاتم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين، سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين المكرمين. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا. آمنا بالله Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim, for the purification of the souls, the enlightenment of the hearts, the acceptance of the deeds, and for the hastening of the reappearance of the awaited Saviour, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, enlighten your souls, and the atmosphere with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected elders, sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The sight of the holy head of Sayyid Shababi Ahl al-Jannah, the grandson of the Holy Prophet, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. So tragically placed on a spear, paraded from one city to another, mistreated, mishandled, abused, is one of the most heart-rendering, heartbreaking sights and images that emerged from the 10th of Muharram. There is no doubt in our minds that when it comes to the holy head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and what happened to it, it's a story that fills us with grief. If it's a story that is unimaginable, let alone an idea that we can indeed fathom. How is it that only 50 years after the sad demise of his grandfather, the grandson's head is placed on a spear and treated in such a despicable, unacceptable way? Yet of course, the story of the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam has brought forward a number of important and interesting questions that many people have asked. These questions desire or need to be answered, need to be looked at historically, need to be analyzed. Questions that, for example, include who was the individual who beheaded the Imam alayhi salam? Because there are narrations from many books of history that says, for example, Sinan ibn Anas beheaded the Imam. Yet many of us are of the impression that it was Shimr ibn al-Jawshan. Similarly, what happened to the head, holy head of the Imam alayhi salam? When it comes to it being taken in Kufa, exactly who is the individual who took it there? Importantly, how did the ruler of Kufa, Ubaydullah bin Ziyad alayhi la'inullah, deal with the head? And at the same time, there are important narrations in Sunni and Shia literature that the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam spoke. Is this acceptable? Is this reliable? Is it something that you and I can find? For example, why, if it did speak, what's the reason for it to have spoken? Similarly, the journey of the head across 26 different places and sites, from Kufa to Sham. How was the head treated? What were the main incidents that you and I may not have come across regarding the holy head of the Imam alayhi salam? And importantly, in the actual place of Sham, before the entrance, before the holy head was taken to the courtyard of the wretched Yazid, what were the occurrences that took place regarding the blessed Ra'sul Hussein? And at the same time, there are 6 possible locations for the burial of the site of the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. What do we say regarding this? Which is more reliable? Which is more acceptable? And how do we accept or discuss the other possible narrations? The holy head of the Imam alayhi salam was so important that even enemies or individuals who are considered to be Nasibi or haters of the Ahl al-Bayt have written books about it. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah has a book known as Ra'sul Hussein, the head of Hussein. Ibn Taymiyyah, the mastermind of terrorism, the founder of terrorist organizations like Daesh, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, you name it. No doubt they seek inspiration from this particular individual, whom today is still being taught in madrasas and schools across the Western world, whereby he is being glorified by many, many individuals. I remember one particular respected scholar from the other schools here in the United States. He came forward and said, we disagree with Ibn Taymiyyah, but we like some of his stuff. So we take the good stuff and we leave the bad stuff. No doubt, Shaitan worshipped Allah for 6,000 years. So we can, in his idea, praise Shaitan for his 6,000 years of worship, but not follow him in the other ways. That's a very, unfortunately, very shallow, very limited way of looking at an individual whose fatwas have been used by terrorist organizations to justify the indiscriminate killing of innocent human beings, at least for the last 20, 30 years, if not indeed more. Therefore, these questions need to be posed. Why? Because Imam Zayn al-Abidin al-Sajjad, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, when it comes to the holy head of Imam alayhi salam, says this is an important subject. In a riwayah, he says, خرجنا مع الحسين. He says, we left with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. فما نزل منزلا. Imam did not stay anywhere on the journey to Karbala. Who? Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. ولا ارتحل. And he did not leave that place. إلا وذكر يحيى بن زكريا. That Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam would continuously mention who? Yahya, the son of Zakaria. And then Imam alayhi salam, Zayn al-Abidin says, وَقَالَ يَوْمًا, says one day, what did he say? مِنْ هَوَانِ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى اللَّهِ أَنَّ رَأْسَ يَحْيَا أُهْدِيَ إِلَى بَغِيٍّ مِنْ بَغَايَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. Imam al-Sajjad says, one of the objectives that Imam al-Husayn would mention Yahya ibn Zakaria every time is that he would refer to the head of Yahya. And that Yahya's head was given to one of the most wretched individuals, one of the most deviant of Bani Israel. Today, in Damascus, some of you may have visited the site of the place of the burial of the head. Of whom? Of Yahya ibn Zakaria. Some say his body there, some say his head was there, presented in Sham. And Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam would highlight the fact that the head of Aba Abdullah would become a symbol of the oppression and the injustice that befell upon the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. That's why I remember the story many years ago that one of the mu'mineen in Iraq, and today when we look at the situation in the Muslim world, when we look at what's happened in Syria, when we analyze what's going on, for example, in Palestine, in Gaza, and other places, and no doubt tonight our hearts are broken. When we see these sights of the innocent men, women, but especially the children dying of hunger, of malnutrition, this starvation by the Zionist entity, this ethnic cleansing, genocide that is taking place breaks our hearts. Many believers, however, must never forget that this would have been the case in Iraq today if it wasn't for the Marja'iyya. That the Marja'iyya, headed by Ayatollah Sistani Hafidhahullah, saved Iraq from such a catastrophe. And the recognition is when Daesh, and before it Al-Qaeda in 2006, sought to attack Iraq, and they were 50 kilometers away from Najaf and Karbala, and said we will destroy it. It was the fatwa of Ayatollah Sistani, the effort of the believers to defend that country from the scum of humanity. That was what Daesh. And today what we have, the relative prosperity, is because of the wisdom of our ulama and marja'iyya. One of the mu'mineen, he lost his 4 sons fighting ISIS, Daesh. And he was told by others, all 4 were beheaded. This beheading, we are not surprised when we see these individuals do it. Yes, when we read the story of how Sayyid al-Shuhada was beheaded. This man, when he lost 4 of his sons in this tragic way, went to see His Eminence Ayatollah Sistani Hafidhullah. He said to him, the bodies of my sons have not been returned. I do not have any graves for them. Therefore, I am requesting from you permission for me to dig 4 graves for them in the local cemetery in the city that I live. And I would like to go and pay my respects and remember my 4 shuhada sons who were all beheaded defending Islam, Shi'ism, the shrines, and ultimately humanity. His Eminence said to him, there's no need. He said, why? He said, if you want to remember them, pay respects to them, go to the place where Ashab al-Hussein are buried. They are there with the companions of Abu Abdullah. The recognition that emerges is that the idea that these shuhada lost their heads is in solidarity with the martyrs of Karbala. At the top of that list, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. when it comes to historians, like for example Tabari, Mas'udi, you have instances such as Ibn Kathir and Ibn Athir. These are colossal, huge historians. They come forward, when they analyze Karbala, they say the individual who eventually killed Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is Sinan ibn Anas. And that's the conclusion that they have come to, that the actual murderer of Sayyid al-Shuhada was Sinan. However, at the same time, many of us have come across narrations as well as passages in Ziyarah that say the killer was Shimr. For example, we are told that Sayyid al-Shuhada himself says that the Holy Prophet of Islam is truthful. صدق الله ورسوله قال رسول الله كأني أنظر إلى كلب أبقع يلغ في دماء أهل بيتي. Yes, the Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam points to Shimr and says this is an individual that the Prophet said he's like a dog, thirsty, biting and chewing from the flesh of my own Ahl al-Bayt alayhum salam. In Ziyaratul Nahiya al-Muqaddasa, which is attributed to the Holy 12th Imam, may Allah hasten his reappearance, we are told that what? That Imam says, وَالشِّمْرُ جَالِسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِكَ. That Shimr sat on your chest. Without a shadow of a doubt, many of us are aware of this particular realization. Ulama have come forward and said there is one way of reconciling the seemingly contradictory idea that was it Sinan who beheaded the Imam? And tonight's analysis is historical. It breaks the heart without a shadow of a doubt. In many ways, it's like a maqtal. A story of the carrying of the head is painful for the heart of the lover of Imam al-Hussein. But it seeks to look at it from the academic perspective as well as a historical perspective to clarify some of the ideas that we may have. And therefore, some say the one way of looking at this particular question is by saying that Sinan in historical records was an individual who was what? Who was hesitant to kill the Imam. These maqatil literature say that when Umar ibn Sa'ad said, make sure you relieve him, it was Sinan who kept coming to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and going back. Kept coming and going back. He did not have what? Did not have the strength to actually come and kill the Imam. So what happened was, some ulama say it was Shimr who is the one who murdered the Imam, but Sinan is the one who beheaded him, not Shimr. Some ulama of us have said this. Others have said no, it was Sinan who came and struck the Imam to the extent that he became unconscious. He was still alive, but it was the la'een, and both are lu'ana. It was the la'een Shimr who actually beheaded the Imam, which is to be the most likely scenario. The third suggestion is that it was Shimr who was the murderer and the killer of the Imam and the one who beheaded him, but immediately gave the holy head of the Imam to Sinan. And therefore Sinan carried it. So historians saw that Sinan was the carrier of the head of the Imam on a spear, and therefore came to the conclusion, some of them, like the names I mentioned, that he was indeed the murderer. Now what really breaks the heart is what I'm about to say next. Because I seek pardon from the Imam of our time, because it's important to analyze this and to understand this. Sometimes it's difficult to mention it in such detail in Masa'ib, but the question is how the Imam was beheaded. And this has been the subject of two particular narrations. One from the Holy Eighth Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. When he says to Ibn Shabib, إن كنت باكيا لشيء فابكي للحسين بن علي. If you are going to cry for anything, then cry for Hussein. فإنه ذبح كما يذبح الكبش. Because Hussein was slaughtered just like a sheep or a goat is slaughtered. Now, today you ask those who do that, and the answer is that usually the slaughter happens from the front. However, we have another narration from the Holy Fourth Imam that seems to suggest that that was not the case. The fourth Imam says in a riwayah, أَنَا ابْنُ الْمَقْتُولِ ظُلْمًا. I am the son of the one who was killed oppressively. أَنَا ابْنُ الْمَجْزُورِ مِنَ الرَّأْسِ الْقَفَى. I am the son of the one who was slaughtered from his back of his neck. Sayyida Zainab, peace be upon her, also when she made the declaration, she said, Wa Muhammada, hadha Husaynun bil-ara. Then she says, Majzur al-Ra's. So he was beheaded from his back. So there are narrations that say he was beheaded from the front. So there are narrations that say he was beheaded from the back. How do we reconcile this with a painful heart? It is mentioned by our ulama that the following took place. That Imam alayhi salam had repeated strikes on his neck, but designed not to kill him, whereby there will be blood that will come out. However, he was turned on his head by the la'in shimr and slowly beheaded. Slowly to increase the pain. Why? Because what happened is the flowing of the blood from the front will create more pain and suffering. And thereafter, the using of the blade will take longer from the back. So they did the maximum possible pain and inflicted the maximum possible suffering to the grandson of the Holy Prophet. These wretched individuals, Shimr, as well as whom? As well as the La'in Sinan ibn Anas. When the holy head of the Imam alayhi salam was then taken, where? Taken towards Kufa. Who is the individual who carried the head? Most of us are aware of the names. These perpetrators of the crimes of Karbala, they need to be known. Why? Because many a times we must not fall in the mistake of what they did and in the grave sins that they performed. This individual, Khawli or Khuwalli or Khuwalla, because of the way his name is mentioned, most likely his name is Khuwalla or Khawli. He immediately took the head of the Imam towards where? Towards Kufa. The riwayat say it was taken whilst the family of the Ahl al-Bayt and the family of the companions were attacked. As soon as Umar ibn Sa'ad said, attack the tents, the head immediately was taken towards Kufa. So it was not taken the next day. It was taken within maybe minutes of the beheading after it was carried on a spear. Why? There are a number of reasons given for this. Number one, that Umar ibn Sa'ad recognized if the head of Imam al-Hussein remains in Karbala, this could be a sight that might ignite others against him and the army, because it's a harrowing sight, the grandson of the Holy Prophet's head. Number two, the idea was that to make and instill fear in the hearts of the people of Kufa, because the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had reached Kufa 2 days or at least a day before the captives had reached. And the other reason is what? Is they wanted to what? They wanted to see the reaction of the people in Kufa. Because when Khuwalli went towards Kufa, on the way, he stopped in a monastery known as Hannana. Most of us have visited it in Najaf today. It's known as Masjid-e-Hannana. It was turned into a masjid, but some say it was a monastery at that time. He stopped and he placed the holy head there. There are some indications or weak narrations that say the head was buried there, but as we will discuss, this is not necessarily established. Thereafter, he continued until he reached the Qasr al-Imara. He reached the palace, yet it was locked. So he could not enter. Why? Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, that wretched La'in, had left Kufa. He was not in Kufa. He was on the outskirts of Kufa, scared because of the reaction of the people. He did not know how the people of Kufa would respond to the news of the massacre of Karbala. Therefore, he was even scared to stay in the palace. Therefore, the palace's doors were locked. And Khuwalli could not take the head of the Imam towards the palace. Where does he go? He goes home. He is married to 2 women. One of them is called Al-Ayuf. Yes? And this particular lady, when he enters, he says to her, I have bought the head of the son of Fatima. Imagine. Imagine the dark nature of the heart of an individual, that they boast by bringing the head of Imam al-Hussein. To that extent that he was boasting that he has the head of Abu Abdullah. And so the narration says, she looks at him and says, how dare you, may God curse you. People bring gold and silver and you bring the head of the daughter of the Holy Prophet. How dare you? She then said to him, I will not share a bed with you ever from now on. He placed the holy head in an oven, in a place where they bake bread. She said, that night I saw in my own eyes the light radiating and illuminating from that place to the heavens. She said the holy head of Imam al-Hussein was filled with what? With that light. In the morning, Khuwalli, and by the way, this lady, noble lady, Al-Ayuf, later Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, each and every perpetrator of Karbala he was searching for. He came to the house of Khuwalli. Where is the one who carried the head? He was hiding in the bathroom because they had an area where they relieved themselves. He was hiding there. This lady of Ayuf, her husband, she said, I don't know where he is. And she pointed towards the bathroom. And so they took him out, beheaded him, and took his head towards where? Towards Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Each and every of these wretched individuals would be treated in the way that they treated Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So he trampled on the 10 illegitimate men who trampled on the body of Imam al-Hussein. Mukhtar did exactly the same thing upon them until they were all killed. Likewise, Khuwalli or Khuwalla was also beheaded. In the morning, what does he do? He takes the head towards the palace. This time, Ubaidullah is now back. When he takes the head towards the palace, a man emerges from Karbala, Hamid ibn Muslim. Hamid ibn Muslim was there. Now what seems to have happened is that he leaves the caravan early, reaches Kufa that night or early hours of the morning. Where are we talking about? 11th of Muharram now. 11th of Muharram, Hamid Muslim says, as a historian, I went inside the palace. He said, when I went inside the palace, I saw this sight, which of course he writes about. He said, I saw Ubaidullah sitting there, laughing, poking the head of Imam al-Hussein. He said there were a number of companions of the Prophet who were there who objected. One of them, Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik, he began to say, Wallahi, I saw in my own eyes where you're poking, the Prophet kissed the eyes and the lips and the cheek of Hussein. You are poking the same place where I saw the Prophet embrace. Yes. Another individual, Zayd ibn Arqam. Zayd ibn Arqam, well known companion of the Holy Prophet of Islam. He comes forward after seeing this horrific sight of the abuse of Ubaidullah bin Ziyad to the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He comes out of the palace. He starts speaking to people in Kufa. He says, Antum ya ma'shar al-Arab, O you who are Arabs, al-Abid ba'd al-Yawm. The sight I've just seen has made you all slaves after today. What does he say? قتلتم ابن فاطمة وأمرتم ابن مرجانة. You have killed the son of Fatima and you placed the son of Marjana as your head. فهو يقتل خياركم. He has killed the worst of your people. ويستعبد شراركم. And he has made you all what? Slaves for him. فرضيتم بالذل. Today you are happy with being disgraced and humiliated. What we are told thereafter is another companion of the Prophet, Qais ibn Ibad, when he sees this sight. Now these companions of the Prophet, they are absolutely appalled. They were not necessarily pro-Shia, by the way. For example, Anas ibn Malik, he refused to admit that he saw the Prophet of Islam raise the hand of Ali in Ghadir. And he refused to give testimony that Amir al-Mu'mineen is the legitimate Khalifa after the Holy Prophet. And he suffered with leprosy and a disease after. Yes, this Anas ibn Malik was not a follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But even those who were against the Ahl al-Bayt, when they saw that horrific sight of the head of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, they could not hold themselves except to speak out in the presence of a tyrant. When they see injustice, even the enemies would what? Would utter these particular words. Qais ibn Ibad came forward and said to Ubaidullah, said, this man, everyone here wants the shafa'ah of his grandfather on the day of judgment, the intercession. And what you have done is what? You have now asked for the intercession of your grandfather, which you will never get, and he will never give. So Ubaidullah was distressed by the fact that these companions of the Prophet of Islam are now beginning to speak out. Zayd ibn Arqam now says, when I went out, I saw that the head is now being paraded in the streets of Kufa before the caravan of captives have come. Ubaidullah, distressed by the mini revolt of the companions of the Prophet, said, I want the head to be placed and be shown to all the people of Kufa in the streets and in the markets. So it began to be paraded. And the captives have not yet arrived. What happens there is Zayd ibn Arqam said, I went to see the reaction of the people. I began to hear. He said, I listened and many people around me listened. The head of Sayyid al-Shuhada began to recite verses of the Quran. And it recited verses from Surah Kahf, chapter 18 of the Quran. أَمْ حَسِبْتَ أَنَّ أَصْحَابَ الْكَهْفِ وَالرَّقِيمِ كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا. He says the head of Imam used to recite that this ayah that says, do you think that the people of the inscription and the youth of the cave are not but a great sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So I began to come close to the head to make sure that the head is what? It is coming from the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And interestingly, this narration has been found in a number of Sunni books as well as Shia literature. So it is not something that is confined only within the books of the Shia. He comes forward and says, when I heard this directly from the head of the Imam, I began to say to him, رَأْسُكَ وَاللَّهِ يَبْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أَعْجَبْ وَأَعْجَبْ. He says, I began to speak to the head and said, Ya, O grandson of the Holy Prophet, your head speaking is a greater sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the people of the cave and the people of the inscription. Question. Some people say, how is this possible? How can a head which is decapitated, removed from the body, how is it possible that it speaks? Is this actually acceptable or not? I ask you, the Lord that saved Yunus from the belly of the whale and Yusuf from the well and Ibrahim from the fire, it will be the Lord who will make Hussein speak and the head of Abu Abdullah utter the truth. There is no doubt in that. There is no doubt in our mind. But there are important reasons why the head of Imam al-Hussein spoke these ayat. Please focus on this, because some people say, okay, why? What is the reason why these verses in particular were uttered by Imam al-Hussein's alayhi salam's head in those moments? Number one is to show it's a miracle, because the verses say these are signs of Allah. Number two, it is to indicate that it's not only a miracle, it's an ayah. Min ayatina ajaba. Yes, because there is a miracle which is a mu'jiza, and there is an ayah which means a sign of Allah, which means what? It leads people towards oneness, tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number three, Surah Al-Kahf. Those who analyze Surah Al-Kahf have come to the conclusion that many of the verses speak about monotheism. Sayyid al-Shuhada speaking and his head uttering these ayat is an indication that I gave my life and I gave everything so that Tawheed is established. And this was something that his beloved son would utter. How many times we heard this? That in Medina, someone asked Imam alayhi salam, fourth Imam, how do I know that your father was successful in his movement, in his mission, in his revolt? He would say, the moment you hear the adhan being recited, know that Karbala was a success. Therefore, what do we find? That's another reason. But another important reason is Raj'a. What do we mean? The fact that the head spoke was an indication for people to remind themselves that there is a belief that is what? That the holy individuals as well as their most wretched will return in dunya before akhirah. And this year in Muharram, I analyzed this and examined this in detail for those who want to have a better understanding. That we have reliable, authentic hadiths, at least 3, which have reached a level of what? Of Hasan or Mu'tabar, meaning they are accepted. Their chain of narration is strong. These narrations say that the first human being who will return in dunya after the reappearance of the holy 12th Imam, who will return and will be seen in people, and the place of his return in other narrations it says Kufa, is none other than Sayyid al-Shuhada Abu Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And the raj'a is our aqidah and our belief, no doubt. Yes? In other words, those who do not believe it, they can believe whatever they wish. There are those other outside the school of Ahl al-Bayt, they will come forward and say, that's not our aqidah. So, well, that's not your, necessarily, not our problem. You don't believe in it. It exists in our narrations. 6 Imam says, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُؤْمِنْ بِرَجْعَتِنَا. Anyone who does not believe in our return is not one of us. No doubt, the head of Imam al-Hussein speaking highlights the importance of raj'ah. When this was being paraded, the narrations tell us that the caravan of the captives began to enter Kufa. And here it is truly heartbreaking, the sight that some historians and ulama have demonstrated. Allama Majlisi in Bihar, he says, when the caravan entered the gates of Kufa, immediately people saw many individuals chained, many individuals being dragged. He says that the moment when people began to weep and cry is when Sayyida Zainab saw the head of Imam al-Hussein. And the riwayah says the moment she saw the head, she hit her head, her own head, on what? On a structure that she was inside, or she had, for example, a metal structure, and it starts that bleeding was seen in her holy face. She was so distraught she could not hold herself from, and this is in the words of Allama Majlisi. Now, what happened was that thereafter the heads of the other shuhada were now being brought with the caravan. So it seems that the only head that was taken earlier was the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and the heads of the rest of the shuhada were bought with the caravans. In the Amali of a man by the name of Shujari, who is a non-Shia, he says that Qasim, the son of Asbagh ibn Nubata, says the moment the heads entered Kufa, we saw there was one head missing. There was a head of all the shuhada, but there was one head that was not there, and that was the head of Qamaru Bani Hashim, Abu al-Fadl. He said that one was not there. Eventually, he said, we saw Harmala ibn Kahil with his horse enter, and he had the head of Abbas wrapped next to the horse's head. And he had it in a way where every time the horse would stop, the head would fly out and hit the back of the horse. And when he would gallop, the head would go forward and hit the ground. Such was what? We are not yet at the Masa'ib. Such was the idea of the brutality of these particular individuals, that they would carry in a humiliating way the head of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, especially Abu al-Fadl, peace and blessings be upon him. Thereafter, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, 40 men, after there was a lot of exchanges, there were 40 men who were responsible in taking the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and the head of the shuhada alongside the captives towards that painstaking journey from where? From Kufa towards Sham. And we are told they stopped in a number of very important places. I'll mention a few incidents only related to the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. For example, they stopped in a place in Mosul, which today has a site known as Maqam Ra's al-Hussein. Many of these places, when they stopped later, the communities there would commemorate and would uphold the place in which the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was placed. So today we have many sites like this. We have one in Halab known as Mashhadun Nuqta, the place of the drop, because one drop of blood, sacred blood from Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's head dropped in where? In Aleppo, in Halab. So they have a site on a rock. Similarly, they have a similar site in a place known as Humat in modern day Syria, as well as in Mosul. All these places have what? Maqams, places of the head of the Imam alayhi salam. Now, two important incidents that need to be remembered. One of them is what? Is a monastery that they reached on the way towards Damascus. This monastery, there was an individual who saw that they were carrying the head in a very disrespectful way. So he said, who are these people, captives, and this head? They said to him, this is a rebel. They said, what is the identity of the rebel? He says, they reply, that is the son of Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, he begins to become surprised. He said, if we had anything left from Jesus, we would have honored it and respected it and placed it in great light. Yet you have the head of the grandson of your Prophet and you treat it this way? I will give you 10,000 dirhams. Let me keep it for one night. He says, okay, very well. He gives them the 10,000 in a bag, and he is given the holy head. He takes it inside the monastery. He takes the holy head out. He begins to wash it. He perfumes it. He cleans it. And he looks at it. Imagine that guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he falls asleep next to the head. And what happens in the dream? He sees there are variations of the narration. Some say the head spoke to him. Some say he saw Imam alayhi salam in his dream. In the morning, what happened? When he was returning the head, he said to them, I will give you whatever you want. Make sure you do not disrespect this head. They said to him, why? He said, what I saw last night, I would try to declare to the world that this man is a special man, is a holy man, and I, from this moment, bear witness. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Immediately, they said, very well, give us money, whatever you want, we will respect the head. The moment they went out of that city, they went back to passing the spear with the head of Imam al-Hussein loosely between the soldiers, to the extent that sometimes it would fall on the ground and the horses would step on it. And it's very interesting that when they reached Sham, the head of the particular caravan that we are told was Muhaffaz ibn Tha'laba plus Shimr. These two were heading there, 40 men who were taking the captives of the Ahlul Bayt with the heads of the Shuhada. Muhaffaz ibn Tha'laba says, when we reached Sham, we were happy with the 10,000 dirhams that we have obtained from that particular monk. So the moment we entered the palace of Yazid, we opened the bag and it was all ashes. There was no money whatsoever. All we felt the money was there, and we saw the money when the monk gave it to us. But we knew that this was what? This was some kind of a miracle. How did it turn into ashes? He says we found it difficult to explain. The other place that I'd like to remind you or tell you of a very interesting incident that you may have not come across is Aleppo. When the head of Imam al-Hussein reached Halab, there's a group of people who lived there who were Shi'as, followers of Ahl al-Bayt, and they had made a small shrine for Imam al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. This man, his name is Abdullah ibn Umar al-Ansari. This Abdullah ibn Umar al-Ansari, he used to have this thing where he would remember Imam al-Hasan, and he said, I want this grave to what? To remind me of an Imam that I love. The moment the captives entered Aleppo and they saw the heads, a daughter of this Abdullah by the name of Durratul Saf, her name was Durratul Saf, alongside 70 women who were from the followers and the lovers of Ahl al-Bayt, became so enraged with anger and frustration and disappointment with the sight that they were saying, they went towards Shimr and that particular individual by the name of Muhaffaz ibn Tha'laba. And they said, we demand that we are given the heads. They said, no, we will not give you the heads. They said, we will not move. We will stop you from moving until you give us the head. What happened was a massacre. All these 70 were immediately killed by Shimr and that man. 70 women and later some men in Aleppo were massacred. Why? Because they stood up for the truth and sought what? And sought justice and at least wanted to defend Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and his sacredness. No doubt though, amongst the most tragic of incidents that happened to the holy head was in Sham. And time does not allow us to go into detail. However, we are aware of a number of things that happened to the holy head of Imam alayhi salam as the caravan of the captives entered Sham. Number one, the head of the Imam alongside the caravan was kept for 3 days at the gates of Sham. And the caravan of the captives, they were humiliated to the extent that Kulthum Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayha would say to Sahl ibn Sahl al-Sa'adi, who was a companion of the Prophet of Islam, who said, I saw the holy head of Imam al-Hussein on a spear, and he said that the moment I saw him, this head on the spear for such a long time, people were walking past and they were seeing the head, and he said, in my own eyes, I saw a female from the people of Sham pick up a piece of rock, huge piece of rock, and smash it on the head of Abu Abdullah. She said, I saw this. He said, I saw this in my eyes. This Kulthum, she said, I asked Sahl ibn Sa'ad. I said, please, I would like to ask you to give money to the person carrying the head to take the head away from us. Because everybody is looking at us. Our faces are exposed. We are feeling what? We are feeling embarrassed because we are under the watchful eyes of everyone. So at least if the head is removed from us, people are not looking at us. Yes? And he tried to do this. Shimr would stop this. She would ask Shimr. Shimr would make sure the head is even closer to them. There was what? There was psychological torment and torture upon the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. Then the next phase was when they entered the entrance of Sham. They were deliberately made to go through an area where Christians and Jews lived. And the people who lived there were told, these are the daughters of the man who killed your forefathers. Take your revenge on them. And so these individuals, what they did, they came out of their houses and from the windows of their particular places, they began to pelt rocks and sticks. And of course, one narration says that the head of Imam Zayn al-Abidin caught fire because some were throwing fire onto the heads and onto these particular holy individuals. No doubt, though, that the courtyard of Yazid witnessed a great number of abuse and unacceptable dealing of the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. In addition to the poking, we have a narration from the holy 8th Imam alayhi salam that says Yazid al-La'in, in addition to the fact that he was poking the head of Imam and reciting these lines of poetry that says that I wish my ancestors from Badr are able to see the victory that I have achieved, he did what? He would drink alcohol next to the head of Imam al-Hussein. And what he did was, according to the narration of the Imam alayhi salam in the book Man La Yahdharuhu al-Faqih by Sheikh al-Saduq, in case someone objects and says, how is this possible? The riwayah is there, it is acceptable by ulama. He says he placed the head on the ground and he would pour alcohol next to the head, yes, in a way to what? To incite and aggravate whom? The Ahl al-Bayt, who were absolutely enraged with anger and what? And frustration that this was taking place. There were objections from people who were Roman ambassadors about the way he was treating the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. There were objections from a number of the Sahaba of of the Holy Prophet of Islam. And no doubt the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was an indication or a way in which many would feel a sense of grief and sadness. And no doubt the story is well known, without going into the musibah, of the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, who when the moment she saw the holy head of Abu Abdullah, she could not live, she could not remain alive when she saw that horrific sight, and she held the head. Now the final question is, eventually, where was the head buried? This is very important. There are a number of narrations. Ibn Sa'ad in his Tabaqat, the historians, number one says it was buried in Medina, in Jannatul Baqi. He said Yazid sent the head to his governor, Umar ibn Sa'id ibn al-As, and said, bury the head next to the grave of his mother Fatima. But our objection, and historians who have rejected this say, number one, the grave of Sayyidah Fatima is hidden. And by the way, there are many today, at the time of Fatimiyya, they place pictures of Jannatul Baqi. Our ulama, Sheikh al-Tusi, Sheikh al-Mufid, many of our established scholars, and I've written a chapter in my book about this for anyone interested to find out more. And even if Zakirs and poets, they say her grave is in Jannat al-Baqi, it's extremely unlikely. Our ulama say no, because the Ahl Sunnah historians, they say the grave next to the four Imams of Fatima bint Asad is the grave of Sayyidah Fatima. We say no, that's Fatima bint Asad radwanullahi ta'ala alayha, the mother of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. The grave of Sayyidah Fatima, although we don't know for sure, is very likely next to the Holy Prophet, or in her chamber, or in the Rawdah. The Rawdatul Jannah that most of us go to pray Ruk'atain. One of the reasons why it's known as the place from Jannah is the possibility, the likelihood that Sayyidah Fatima is buried there. Yes? However, unfortunately, sometimes we fall into this trap of following what other historians from other schools have said regarding Jannatul Baqi. However, we do not believe that the Holy Lady is buried, very unlikely. Imam alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he dug a number of decoy graves in Jannatul Baqi to indicate that she is buried there. The first opinion is rejected. The second opinion is the city of Asqalan. Where is this city? in modern day Palestine. And this city has a shrine today known as Maqam Ra's al-Hussein, the place of the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Why? There was a Abbasid caliph by the name of Al-Muntasir Billah. This Muntasir Billah, he saw a dream. In his dream, he saw that the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is in that area. And by the way, Asqalan is very close to Gaza. And so what happened was that people, because of his dream, he said, I saw this dream. They said, then it must be there. They placed an area and they said, this is the place where we remember the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. We have no indication in history that the head went to Palestine. Why would the head of Imam al-Hussein be sent there? The third opinion, which is quite popular amongst some historians, is Egypt. Many of you have been to Cairo and have visited the maqam known as Maqam Ra's al-Hussein. It's a great place, no doubt, because it highlights to the Muslim world and to whom? To individuals who are fighting the school of Ahl al-Bayt. It highlights what? It highlights the fact that even non-Shi'as have shrines and they honor these sites of reverence. So they come and pay respects next to the shrine. And I've been to it itself. I've seen how people pay respects to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. They say that the head of Imam al-Hussein was sent from Damascus towards Egypt. Yet many of our scholars have said this is not possible. Why? They say historically there should have been a huge welcoming of the head, or at least historians at that time should have written that the head would have arrived. It couldn't be that it somehow found its way secretively. So history is silent about the presence of the head of Imam al-Hussein until much later, where people claim that the head is there. Another area where some scholars have said the head is the grave cemetery known as Babu al-Saghir. Some of us have been to it in Damascus. The grave of Bilal al-Habashi is there, for example. The grave of the wretched Muawiyah is there, for example. They say the head of Imam al-Hussein was not returned with the captives and was buried there. This is not necessarily accepted either, because as we will come to know, that the head was given by Yazid back to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum as-salam. A very interesting narration we have in our own books, such as Allama Majlisi, says the head of Imam al-Hussein is buried next to the body of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Najaf. And this has been the subject of acceptance by some of our ulama. I remember reading some of our fuqaha and scholars say it's very likely, it's possible, that this was the case, that the head of Imam al-Hussein was somehow joined because Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam knew the exact location of the grave of Amir al-Mu'mineen. It was hidden at that time. And he joined the head and he buried the head with the body of Imam al-Hussein, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. However, the qawl al-mashhur, the more reliable, accepted, the more common understanding of the ulama is that the head was joined to the body by the holy fourth Imam in Karbala, whether in Arba'in, before or after. Sheikh al-Saduq, Sheikh al-Murtada, al-Tusi, and Majlisi, they say that this wretched Yazid said to the caravan of the Ahl al-Bayt that you can go, is there any request that you want from me? They said to him, what you have taken from us, you cannot give us back. But if you want to, you can give us the heads of the martyrs. And he said, so be it. This man, Nu'man ibn Bashir, he is accompanying the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, and the heads are indeed given to them to join the bodies. It is no doubt that the story of the head of Imam al-Hussein is heartbreaking. But I'd like to end this with the musibah that truly, truly, truly breaks the heart. Wallah, when I read this, I could not fathom the pain of those who were next to the head of Imam and what they saw. The wretched Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, we are told in Kufa, when the head was about to leave Kufa, they said to him, when we place the head of Imam on the spear, it doesn't sit well and we can't raise the spear highly because it falls. He said, take the head and empty the contents from within. So they started to take part of the head of Imam al-Hussein from inside to make sure that it fits the spear. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the brutality that even they would not leave the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein in this way? Yes. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, according to narrations, when he came to join the head with the body, what would he say to his father? Imagine that moment when Imam al-Sajjad is placing the head next to the body. Yes. Which musibah should Imam al-Sajjad say to his father? He says, Abatah ya Aba Abdullah. The poet describes this. He says, I could imagine Imam Zayn al-Abidin saying to his father, oh father, your chest was crushed under the hooves of the horses, but your head was also crushed under the hooves. Oh father, they stabbed you on your neck, and they stabbed you on your chest, and they stabbed you on your arms. They also injured your face and injured your head. Oh father, they mistreated your body, they mistreated your head. Imam al-Sajjad would maybe speak to his father in such a manner, but then he would say, oh father, when it came to your musibah, it breaks the heart, but oh father, your head was one that broke the heart of the people in Sham, but the most that it broke was your daughter there. Yes, your daughter Sakina, Ruqayya. Oh father, today we have left her all alone in Sham. Imagine the Ahl al-Bayt have buried this young daughter of Imam al-Hussein, and tonight when we are reciting this musibah, the shrine of Sayyida Zainab is empty. The shrine of Sayyida Sakina is empty. There are no zuwar there. There are no people doing matam as much as before, or even remotely close to before. They have all of a sudden become asir. They have become captives once again. Imagine that musibah was a musibah that broke the heart of Imam Zayn al-Abidin and broke the heart of Sayyida Zainab, because when they came back to Medina, they had to tell the news of the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein and Abbas and Akbar and Qasim. But there was that young Fatima who was left in Medina. She would come forward and say, oh Auntie Zainab, when you left Medina, there were a number of children with you. Please tell me, where are they? It's as if Zainab would say, who are you asking for? She says, where is my young brother Asghar? Where? Tell me, where can we find Asghar? Why haven't you not returned Asghar? Have you left him somewhere? Is he now being looked after by someone? Tell me, oh Auntie Zainab, I want to hug my Asghar again. Yes, imagine what would Zainab say to that young daughter of Imam al-Hussein. How would she describe the musibah of Asghar? And then if she tells her that, the young daughter would say, oh my auntie, you left with my sister, the young Sakina. Where is she? Why can't we see? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين وإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. My dear sisters and brothers, let's not forget our brothers and sisters. It's time for salah. It's a time for the acceptance of dua. Our sisters and brothers suffering in Gaza, in Palestine, going through incredible difficulties and pain as we speak. They have been for the last nearly 2 years, but the starvation, the malnutrition, the lack of basic necessities truly breaks the heart. Let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to alleviate the suffering of our sisters and brothers everywhere, especially in Gaza. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to end the suffering of mu'mineen and mu'minat with the reappearance of a holy 12th Imam, and to make us of his devout and sincere followers. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa salli lahumma ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
Just a quick announcement before Azan, inshallah. Tomorrow, after Maghrib, there will be a short children's majlis, followed by some craft activities and snacks. This program is being organized by the Al-Ain Social Care Foundation, and it'll be, inshallah, a great way for children to connect with the spirit of Muharram. And we'd love to see you and your families join. Jazakallah. The age for participation in the program is 8 to 12, but inshallah 4 to 12, but inshallah please come, everybody else outside that age range is open to attend.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا